The courtroom was quiet. The judge had not arrived yet. Lawyers, police officers, and a few reporters waited in their seats. Some were checking their phones. Others whispered softly to each other. Near the back of the room, a black janitor pushed a mop across the floor. He was an older man, maybe in his late 50s. His hair was short and gray. His uniform was clean, and his eyes were sharp. He didn't speak. He just worked, silent, calm, focused. Then the door opened, and Mr. Grant walked in. He was a well-known lawyer in the city, rich, powerful, and full of pride. His suit was expensive. His hair was perfect. He carried himself like he owned the courtroom. As he walked toward the front, he suddenly stopped. His eyes had caught something, or someone. It was the janitor. The janitor had just finished cleaning the floor near the judge's bench. He stepped aside, holding his mop. Mr. Grant smirked. "You missed a spot," he said loudly. The janitor didn't respond. He just looked at him quietly. Mr. Grant stepped closer. "What's wrong? Too hard for you? Maybe cleaning isn't your thing." Some people chuckled. A few court officers looked away, uncomfortable. The janitor calmly moved to the side and began cleaning another spot. Mr. Grant shook his head and laughed. "Unbelievable. They'll hire anyone these days. What's next? Letting janitors give legal advice?" Now everyone was watching. The room was tense. But the janitor still didn't speak. He just looked at Mr. Grant for a second, his eyes full of something strange. Not anger, not fear, but power. Quiet, calm power. Mr. Grant didn't notice. He turned to a young intern sitting nearby. "You see that?" he said loudly, pointing at the janitor. "That's what happens when you don't finish school. You end up cleaning other people's mess." The intern didn't laugh. He just looked at the janitor, confused, almost nervous. Suddenly, the door opened again. The judge entered. Everyone stood up, even the janitor. "Good morning," the judge said as she sat down. "Let's begin." Mr. Grant stood tall, proud, ready for the case to start. But the judge looked around the room and paused. Her eyes landed on the janitor, who had moved to a corner now. "Mr. Langston," she said softly, almost with respect. Mr. Grant turned his head. "Who?" he asked. The janitor nodded politely at the judge. Mr. Grant laughed again. "Judge, I think you're confused. That's just the janitor." The judge didn't smile. "We'll begin shortly," she said. "In the meantime, let's keep the room respectful." Mr. Grant sat down, rolling his eyes. But something had changed in the room. The laughter had stopped. The silence felt heavier now. A few people glanced at the janitor again. Their eyes showed curiosity, and something else, uncertainty. The janitor walked out of the courtroom quietly. But before he left, he looked back once. And in that moment, the young intern saw it. The janitor's face wasn't just calm, it was calculating, like someone who was watching everything and understanding more than anyone else in the room. Who was he really? That question would soon shake the courtroom. But for now, all anyone saw was a mop, a uniform, and a man who didn't fight back. But maybe he didn't need to. Maybe he was waiting. The trial had started. Reporters filled the back seats. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but everyone outside was talking. It was a big case. A senator was accused of corruption, and Mr. Grant was leading the defense. He loved the attention. But inside the courthouse, something else was happening, quiet, unnoticed by most. The janitor was still there. He moved from hallway to hallway, pushing his cleaning cart. His badge said J. Langston, but no one called him by name. To them, he was just the man with the mop. Still, a few people had started to whisper. "Have you seen the new janitor?" A clerk said softly in the break room. "He's strange. Too quiet." Another clerk nodded. "I saw him reading a legal file the other day. Not just reading, studying it." A janitor reading court files. Someone asked, confused. The others shrugged. That same afternoon, a young intern named Kyle was organizing folders outside the courtroom. He dropped one by accident. Papers spilled across the floor. Before he could bend down, someone was already picking them up. It was the janitor. "Here," the janitor said, handing over the papers. Kyle took them, surprised. Thanks. He paused. You know this file? He asked, looking at the janitor. The janitor nodded. It's the senator's financial records. Page 6 is missing. Kyle blinked. You read that? I noticed things, the janitor said, and walked away. Kyle stood frozen. How did he know that? How did he spot the missing page without even looking closely? Later that day, Kyle went to the clerk's office to check something and got another surprise. A court clerk whispered to a colleague, Judge spoke to the janitor again today, alone, behind closed doors. What for? The other asked. No idea, the clerk replied, but she stood when he left the room. I've never seen her do that for anyone. The whispers started to grow. One security officer said he once saw the janitor typing something fast on a laptop, codes and legal numbers. When the officer looked closer, the janitor smiled and closed the screen. Strangest janitor I've ever seen, the officer mumbled. Meanwhile, Mr. Grant was too busy showing off. He gave interviews outside the courthouse every day. He joked about how easy the case was. He told reporters the senator would walk free. But inside, things weren't so simple. One night, after the courtroom closed, Mr. Grant returned to pick up a forgotten file. As he walked in, he heard voices. He stopped. From behind the judge's door, he heard two people talking. One was the judge. The other voice was lower, calm, strong. He pressed his ear against the door. You've done enough, Joseph, the judge said. But are you sure about this? Yes, the man said. They need to reveal themselves. The truth must come out. I'll keep watching. Mr. Grant's heart skipped. Joseph. He frowned. That name again. He quickly stepped back as the door opened. The janitor stepped out. They locked eyes. Mr. Grant's fake smile returned. Still mopping floors? He asked. The janitor didn't reply. He simply walked past him, leaving silence in his wake. Mr. Grant narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. The janitor wasn't just a janitor. And now Mr. Grant was starting to feel it. The courtroom was watching him. But someone else was watching the courtroom. Someone very powerful, hiding in plain sight. The courtroom was full. Every seat was taken. Reporters scribbled notes. Court officers stood near the walls, alert and serious. The air felt heavy. It was the second week of the trial. The senator sat at the defense table, his face hard and cold. Beside him, Mr. Grant looked confident as ever. He smiled, fixed his tie, and tapped his pen on the table like he was already winning. But things were not going his way. Strange things were happening. Witnesses who had promised to support the senator suddenly changed their stories. Evidence that was supposed to be missing was found and brought into court. And every time something new appeared, the judge would glance, just for a second, at the janitor. Mr. Grant noticed. At first, he thought it was a coincidence, but now he wasn't so sure. The janitor, Mr. Joseph Langston, didn't do much. He didn't talk. He just cleaned quietly. But he was always there, always watching, always near when something big happened. And that made people nervous. One afternoon, a USB drive was found on the judge's desk. No one knew who put it there. It contained a video, proof of the senator's secret meeting with a businessman who had since vanished. Mr. Grant was furious. This is ridiculous, he shouted. Where did this come from? Who placed it here? The courtroom was silent. The judge remained calm. The video will be allowed as evidence. Mr. Grant turned to the crowd. His eyes searched and landed on the janitor, who was cleaning near the back. You, Mr. Grant said, pointing. You were here all morning. The janitor looked up slowly. Mr. Grant took a step forward. Did you put this on the judge's desk? The janitor blinked. I clean floors, not desks. A few people smiled at his calm reply. The judge cleared her throat. Mr. Grant, please sit down. Mr. Grant sat, but his hands were shaking. Something wasn't right. He felt it in his bones. That evening, outside the courtroom, Mr. Grant made a call. Look into the janitor, he told his assistant. Find out who he is. I don't trust him. But he's just a janitor, the assistant replied. No, Mr. Grant said. He's something else. While Mr. Grant tried to dig deeper, the janitor continued his quiet work. But others had started to notice him too. One reporter followed him outside during lunch. She tried to ask questions. "Excuse me, sir. What's your full name?" "Joseph," he said. "Joseph what?" He smiled. "Just Joseph." She tried again. "How long have you worked here?" He wiped his hands with a cloth. "Long enough to know who cares about justice and who only cares about power." Then he walked away. The reporter wrote that quote down. She didn't understand it fully, but something about it gave her chills. Inside the court, Kyle, the young intern, started watching the janitor more closely. Every time a new witness appeared, the janitor was nearby. Every time a surprise piece of evidence was presented, the janitor was already standing near the judge's bench, mopping the floor, listening. It was like he knew what was coming before it happened. One night, Kyle stayed late. He had forgotten his notebook. As he walked past the records room, he saw a light on inside. He peeked in. The janitor was there. But he wasn't cleaning. He was reading. Not just reading, studying a thick legal book. Beside him, open on the desk, was a case file marked Solonfidentl. Kyle's breath caught in his throat. The janitor turned and saw him. For a moment, there was silence. Then Mr. Joseph smiled gently. "Lost something?" "And no," Kyle said. "Just surprised." Mr. Joseph stood up. "You're smart, Kyle. Don't stop learning." Kyle nodded slowly. Who are you?" Mr. Joseph picked up his mop and headed for the door. "Someone who's here for the truth," he said quietly. He walked past Kyle and disappeared into the hallway. Kyle stood there, heart pounding. This wasn't just a trial anymore. This was something bigger. And the janitor? He wasn't who they thought he was. Mr. Grant sat alone in his office, late at night. The lights were off. Only the desk lamp was on, casting a yellow glow on the documents scattered before him. But his eyes weren't reading. They were staring, cold, confused, and angry. He had just gotten a file from his assistant. A file on the janitor, Mr. Joseph Langston. But what he saw inside the folder made no sense. No history. No work records before last year. No school data. No social media. No fingerprints on public record. It was like the man didn't exist until he wanted to. Mr. Grant leaned back in his chair. "This is not a janitor," he whispered. The next morning in court, Mr. Joseph Langston was keening near the jury box. The mop moved slowly, back and forth. Calm, steady. But his eyes were moving faster, watching, reading people, reading fear. Kyle, the intern, kept glancing at him. Ever since he saw Joseph reading confidential files, he couldn't stop thinking. Who was this man? How did he know the law so well? And how did he always appear just before something important happened? That day, the courtroom changed. A surprise witness walked in. A woman in her 60s, nervous, holding a stack of papers. She was shaking. The judge looked down. "State your name." "Rosa Mendez," she said quietly. "And your connection to this case." "I worked for the senator. I handled the fake accounts." Gasps filled the room. Mr. Grant jumped to his feet. "Objection. This witness was not in the records." The judge replied, "Her statement was added this morning." Mr. Grant turned. His eyes scanned the courtroom. There, standing in the corner, was Joseph, calm, silent. Mr. Grant sat back down, clenching his fists. Rosa began to speak. Her voice was slow but clear. She told the court everything. Names, dates, hidden accounts, money transfers. Mr. Grant tried to interrupt. "She's lying." But then Rosa pulled out an envelope. Inside were signed documents, with the senator's name. The room went quiet. The judge accepted the envelope and looked at the senator. He was sweating. Mr. Grant couldn't stay quiet anymore. He stood. "This is a setup. Someone is pulling strings. This court is being watched." The judge raised her hand. "Sit down, Mr. Grant." He sat, but his anger boiled. He looked again at Joseph. This time, he walked toward him. Everyone watched as the lawyer approached the janitor. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Mr. Grant hissed under his breath. "What are you? Some kind of spy?" Joseph looked at him. "I'm someone who believes the law should protect people, not just the powerful." Mr. Grant laughed coldly. "You're no hero. You're just a ghost in the corner." Joseph leaned in slightly. "That's the problem. People like you only notice power when it wears a suit, not when it holds a mop." He walked away. Mr. Grant stood there, stunned. Something inside him began to crack, not just fear, shame. Later that evening, Kyle found an old court officer in the break room. "Do you know anything about Joseph Langston?" he asked. The officer paused. Then he whispered, "They say he was once part of the Department of Justice. Big cases, big names. What happened?" "No one knows," the officer said. "He vanished. Rumors say he took down a federal judge once, then disappeared." Kyle's eyes widened. "If that's true," he whispered, "why is he here? Cleaning floors." The officer shrugged. "Maybe he's watching, waiting. Maybe justice works better when no one sees it coming." The next morning, the courtroom was buzzing again. Mr. Grant came in late. He looked tired, pale. His confidence was gone. The senator didn't speak. He kept his head down. And Joseph? He stood by the judge's bench, mopping slowly, but his eyes were sharp as ever. And behind those calm eyes, something was waking up. Not just a janitor, not just a helper, but a man who had worn many masks. And now, one of those masks was beginning to fall. The courtroom doors opened. Everyone turned their heads. A man in a black suit walked in. His steps were firm. His face was serious. He carried a silver briefcase. 2 guards followed behind him. Whispers filled the room. "Who is that? Is he part of the case?" The judge looked up sharply. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. The man walked straight to her bench and handed her a sealed letter. She opened it, read it, then stood up. "I will take a short recess," she said. "This trial will resume in 15 minutes. Gasps again. A judge never paused without reason. Something serious had arrived. Back in the hallway, Mr. Grant paced nervously. He checked his phone. No news. No updates. Then he saw him, Joseph Langston, the janitor, standing by the water cooler. But something had changed. He wasn't wearing his uniform anymore. He wore a black shirt and slacks. Clean. Sharp. Kyle stood nearby, watching everything. The lawyer walked over, angry. "What game are you playing now, Joseph?" Joseph looked at him calmly. "It's not a game. It's the law. Real law. You think you scare me?" "No," Joseph said. "But the truth will." Back inside the courtroom, the judge returned. She held a document in her hand. "This court has received new instructions from the Department of Justice," she said. Everyone fell silent. "The lead investigator for this case has arrived. He will take over the questioning for the remainder of the trial." Mr. Grant stood up. "Wait, what? Who?" The judge looked to the back of the room, and in walked Joseph Langston. But not in janitor clothes. In a black suit, badge clipped to his belt, file in hand. A wave of shock spread across the courtroom. The same man who had mopped the floors, cleaned the windows, and pushed a cart down the halls, was now walking to the center of the courtroom with full authority. Kyle's jaw dropped. The reporter dropped her pen. Even the senator looked up, confused and pale. Mr. Grant stared like he'd seen a ghost. The judge spoke again. "Mr. Langston is a federal prosecutor, former Special Crimes Division. He was assigned to this case 6 months ago under deep cover." Whispers grew louder. Mr. Grant shook his head. No. This is a trick. He's just a janitor." Joseph turned slowly and faced the courtroom. "I was a janitor," he said, "because I needed to see who was honest and who only behaved well when they thought someone important was watching." He walked to the front. The senator abused power, hid money, lied to the public. He looked at Mr. Grant. And his lawyer mocked a man in uniform, a man who cleaned quietly. Because in your mind, people only matter if they wear expensive shoes. Mr. Grant's face turned red. You played us, he said. No, Joseph replied. I watched you play yourself. He placed a thick folder on the table. Inside are recordings, documents, hidden bank files, signed confessions, all collected while I pushed that mop you laughed at. He turned to the judge. I'm ready to present the full report. The judge nodded. Proceed, Prosecutor Langston. The title hit the room like thunder. The janitor was the top federal prosecutor. As Joseph spoke, the courtroom stayed frozen. He told them how he entered the court 6 months ago, how he watched people without them watching him, how justice needed truth, not just power. I wanted to know who still respected people without titles, he said. Sadly, not many did. Mr. Grant tried to interrupt, but the judge warned him. The senator was silent. His lies had caught up to him. And Joseph, he stood taller than ever, because this was never about revenge. It was about reminding the world that justice wears no uniform. The courtroom was empty now. The trial was over. The senator and his lawyer were gone, taken away in silence. But their names were now all over the news. Every screen showed one picture. Joseph Langston, standing tall, wearing his suit, eyes calm. Not a janitor, a federal prosecutor, a man of justice. Back at the courthouse, Kyle stood in the hallway. He waited, then saw him. Joseph walked out slowly, carrying the same mop he had used every morning. Sir? Kyle asked. Joseph smiled. Yes, you're leaving. I've done what I came for, Joseph said. Kyle looked confused. But you could stay. You could teach here, lead something. Joseph looked down at the mop in his hand. This mop taught me more than any office ever did, he said. It let me see who people really are. Kyle was quiet for a moment. Why did you become a janitor? He asked. Joseph leaned against the wall, eyes distant. Years ago, I put away a powerful man, a judge. He was corrupt, dangerous. After the trial, people clapped, said I was a hero. But the next week, Joseph continued, I saw something. A janitor was being yelled at for spilling water, treated like dirt, and no one stood up for him, not even me. He paused. I realized then, people don't change systems with big speeches. They change them by watching what happens when no one is looking. A few days later, a letter was sent to every court in the state, signed by Joseph Langston. It read, Justice is not found in big names or high chairs. It is found in quiet people, in cleaners, in interns, in those who are unseen but never untrue. Remember this. The floor you walk on today may be cleaned by the man who will judge your actions tomorrow. The letter went viral. Across the country, people shared the story of the janitor who saved justice. In a small town, a girl showed her father the news article. Look, Dad, he used to mop floors. Now he's a hero. The father smiled. He was always a hero. People just didn't see it. Back at the courthouse, Joseph returned one last time. He placed the mop in the janitor's closet, folded his uniform, locked the door, and walked away. No press, no camera, just quiet steps. Kyle would go on to become a lawyer, a good one. And on the wall in his office, he hung a small photo. It showed a man in a janitor's uniform, standing in the courtroom, holding a mop. Under it were 5 words, the man who watched quietly. And below that, he wrote, Justice sees everything. Joseph Langston was never seen in court again. But stories of him spread across schools, police academies, and government buildings. They called him the Silent Eye, the man behind the mop. And to those who mocked the weak, he was a reminder. The floor you step on may rise one day and ask you to answer.